Hello, everybody, and welcome to Israel is. This is Avishai speaking, and I want to continue and pick up from where we stopped last week, discussing the ethnic divide within Israel between Ashkenazi, that is, European or more northernly Jews, and Mizrahi Jews from typically Muslim countries. Um, I think that up until like sixth grade, I wasn't aware of the fact that I am Ashkenazi. I knew where my parents were from, but I didn't know that that made me Ashkenazi. I became awakened to it through. Uh, um, I remember one kid in particular interrogating others about what they are, where their parents are from, and what that makes them. Um, and I remember going to my father and asking him, "What is Ashkenazi?" And he's told me that Ashkenazi is a Jew from Europe, which is an oversimplification, but never mind that. I went back to the kids at school and I told them that I'm half Ashkenazi, half American. And they kind of laughed at me because there's no such thing as American. And it's kind of true as far as Jews go, but I didn't know it. And America isn't Europe, so if my mother's from America, then she isn't Ashkenazi, right? I don't know. It was rather innocent to begin with, beyond rather pointless questions about whether or not you're Ashkenazi or Mizrahi or whatever. There wasn't much more to it. But then, about the same time, kids started watching um, these really old, low production Israeli comedies from like the 50s and 60s. And those comedies typically had a very unhealthy focus on uh, ethnicities, Jewish ethnicities, and so you'd have like caricatures of a Persian man who's stingy and very loud and has a very distinct accent, and other ethnic caricatures for other ethnicities. Um, and I would hear kids tease one another about their ethnicities in accordance to these stigmas from the 60s and from the 50s, really old stigmas. And these kind of cult movies kept these stereotypes alive. Um, and I think that like the perennial moment for me as far as understanding what it is to be Ashkenazi in Israel was about that age. I was 12 years old, I believe, and it was evening, and I was coming back home from arts class, uh, trudging along with my ridiculous looking, I guess, briefcase where my drawings were. When two kids who were rather larger than I was, and I believe a couple of years ahead of me, they stopped me and asked me what junior high I was attending and what class. And I was not attending junior high. And this is what I answered, that I was still in elementary. And one of them kind of whispered rather audibly in such a way that I could definitely overhear him. He whispered to the other guy, Ashkenazi, with such malice. I was worried and I just started walking away from them and they did nothing to stop me. But I was so troubled that I couldn't quite let it go, and I looked over my shoulder, and sure enough, one of them seemed to be following me. And I picked up my pace, and l- I looked back again, and again, he seemed to be there. I seem to recall at one point that looking back, and he was no longer there, or I didn't see him. But then I looked back when I was closer to home, and he seemed to be in full on chase mode. And I sprinted as fast as I could uh, back home. And the fact that I got home safe, I kind of wonder whether or not he even attempted to do anything beyond give me a fright. But even if he did not intend me any real physical harm, the fact that he would try to make someone feel this way simply for what they are told me a whole lot. Junior high was another thing altogether. In junior high, the racial and ethnic tensions were pretty much the face of everything. Um, Almost any personal attack, verbal attack, would include the fact that you were Ashkenazi or whatever, whether you're Persian or Moroccan or Yemenite. And this is also something curious now that I come to think of it, that if you were Mizrahi, they would target you for specifically where you're from. But they didn't really care about what particular country from in Europe an Ashkenazi guy was from. Ashkenazi in and of itself was already like a packaged insult. And at this is the point where I began feeling that this thing that I just recently found out I was working against me, and that being Ashkenazi was a vulnerability. It meant that I didn't have a group that would protect me from these types of bullying. I don't know if these are the thoughts of a 14-year-old. Um, Maybe it has nothing to do with my being Ashkenazi, and it has everything to do with the fact that I was a dork. And that dorks and nerds are more vulnerable to bullying, as it were. But I as a teenager, I took these things really to heart. And and then, when you then come and hear the way that the grown-ups speak about these things, and they would speak about historical grievances and essentially evil white man kind of narrative as it pertains to Ashkenazis. And to me, it kind of feels as if the entire narrative about ethnicity in Israel has been imported from the United States without any consideration for the things that are different here. And there is more different here than similar. And it kind of almost feels offensive hearing Mizrahi Jews liken themselves to black Americans. Uh, most importantly, because we have black Israeli Jews, and their grievances seem to me quite a bit more substantial in this day and age. Um, but yeah, it kind of seemed to me that the academics who were speaking about this, the media people who were speaking about this, that they have no real um, awareness of the kind of toxic environment that they were creating and the kind of grievance that they were building within um, young people who didn't really have that grievance to begin with. They kind of inherited it from them. And in many ways it felt like this dynamic was being fed, and that it was still a thing because it was artificially maintained, to the detriment of many people, but it feels to me mostly to the detriment of young Ashkenazi kids. And these are my feelings at any rate. And I just hope that maybe in 30 years' time, this entire issue will no longer be a thing. That, well, for one thing, that the trend of Jews marrying within other different groups will continue, and we could just be Israelis. Yeah, this is me being a multiculturalist, but I think it's important, and I don't care about ethnic divides, and I don't want there to be these things. Again, and I don't care if I'll be tarnished. My name will be tarnished for this, as this Jew is promoting this kind of thing. Whatever. I think it will be for the best. This is it for today, and hopefully I'll see you guys next week. Until then, have an awesome weekend.